Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I just start by paying a huge tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Swansea East, who I think is a force of nature. And I think she talked about that we were at our best when we are compassionate in this place and when we work together. And she certainly embodies that in this debate that we're having today and in the many brilliant campaigns that she's run since becoming a Member of Parliament. I want to just say at the beginning that in Hull we have higher levels of stillbirth and neonatal deaths than the national average. I also want to pay tribute to the excellent work of Hull and East Yorkshire branch of SANS and the campaigning Lullaby Trust. And I also want to recognise the huge steps that have been taken to improve and to make changes to this whole area in the last few years. And the Honourable Member for East Worthing and Shoreham talked about, since 2015, the debates that we've had in the House, I think because the all-party group on baby loss have made it a mission to make sure that we have that every year. And I think there's been a huge amount done since 2015, and I pay tribute to all the officers and everyone who's been involved in that group. I have been raising since 2015 a particular case from Hull. And in fact, I checked back in the records, and I spoke on the 8th of July 2015, the 13th of October 2016, and the 10th of October 2017 about my constituents, Mike and Tina Trohill. And I just want to explain why I've kept raising this in the House of Commons, but also to say that very sadly Michael died a short while ago. So it's now Tina, who's my constituent, who I'm raising this on her behalf. So Tina and Michael had a baby boy, William Michael Brian Trohill, who was born on July the 5th, 1994, at Beverley Westwood Maternity Hospital. Very sadly, he was stillborn, and he was cremated on July the 12th, 1994, at Champlands Avenue Crematorium in Hull. Tina and Mike were told that there would be no ashes from the cremation. They also told me that they were not required to sign any forms. It appears that the forms that were required at the time were signed by an administrator at the hospital. So it's quite shocking, isn't it, that the parents were not asked to even sign the form to give written permission to what should happen to their baby. Now, William was cremated, and moving forward many years, my constituent Tina was alerted to the possible concerns about what had happened to baby William when the Moreton Hall inquiry, which the Honourable Lady for the SNP spoke about, that inquiry was taking place in Scotland. And the report on that inquiry was published in April 2014. And in October 2014, Mike and Tina contacted the bereavement service in Hull and asked to see what it could find out about the circumstances around William. It took, unfortunately, until the 3rd of November for the service to return the call, and the parents were told that an investigation was underway. On the 4th of November, they were told that William's ashes had been scattered in a children's garden of remembrance near the crematorium. On the 5th of November, the parents were told by the funeral director at Frank Stevenson & Co. that it was not normal to receive ashes from a child's cremation. On the 6th of November, they were told that the funeral directors had a document that stated cremate and strew. It appears that at this time, the funeral directors had a blanket contract with Beverley Westwood Maternity Hospital to undertake cremations of babies and were given that instruction. On the 6th of November, my constituent Tina contacted the NHS complaints line, but given the many NHS reorganisations, copies of any procedures or policies in use at the time were not available. So, my constituents came to see me, actually, just before the general election in 2015. And they said to me what they would like to know is what had happened in Hull, were other families affected, what could be found out. So I thought that seemed a very reasonable request, and I asked to see the leader of the council, and I took my constituents with me. The leader of the council, Councillor Brady, was very sympathetic. He understood that it was a very sensitive issue, and he said he would have a think about what to do next. Tina and Mike were very clear they wanted a local independent inquiry, and it was also at the time of the Shrewsbury inquiry, the Enstry inquiry, where I understand that parents, different circumstances but in the same area of concerns about what had happened at the crematorium, run and accountable to the local council. Those parents had gone to see the leader of the council, and he'd said to them, what do you want? And they'd said, we want a local inquiry, independent, let's see what we can find out. And he'd agreed readily. And I understand that that inquiry that cost about £50,000, and they used an independent local solicitor to oversee that inquiry. So that's what my constituents in Hull asked Hull City Council for, a local independent inquiry. And sadly, we received a letter from the council saying that they didn't really think that that would help in the circumstances. They didn't really see the need for it. So I actually raised this with the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, and asked him what did he feel about that, where you've got grieving parents who want to know the answer to questions about what's happened to their children's ashes and are being told, no, we don't really need to do that by a council. I ended up seeing the Secretary of State for Justice at that time. I think the Prime Minister was rather busy and occupied, so I went to see, with Tina, the Secretary of State for Justice, the Right Honourable Member for Surrey Heath. And I have to say, he was an excellent minister in terms of he got it straight away. He understood how for families this was something that needed to be addressed locally, and I was very grateful to him, along with the Secretary of State for Health and the Secretary of State for Local Government at that time. The three very senior ministers wrote to Hull City Council, and I just want to read what they said in their letter to Hull City Council. So this is from the Secretary of State for Justice. My fellow Secretaries of State at the Department of Health and the Department for Communities and Local Government have agreed with me that there is a need for a historic investigation into the practices relating to infant cremations in the Hull area, and we have jointly today written to the Chief Executive of Hull City Council asking him to commission this. We have suggested that the Hull investigation should have terms of reference similar to those of the Enstry inquiry. And I am incredibly grateful for the compassion that that Secretary of State showed to my constituent and to the many other families who came forward, because Tina, like the lady who my honourable friend referred to, had been finding out and talking to other families, and she'd set up the Action for Ashes group in Hull, which has 420 members, and we think about 100 families who've been affected. So Tina's been working very hard to make sure that she provides support and help to other families in these circumstances. So just going forward, the Hull City Council received that letter. Unfortunately, there was a change in the Secretary of State role, because we know in 2016 other events were happening. And Hull City Council basically said to the government, no, we think we've looked and the parents are now fine. There's no reason to have a local independent inquiry, which was not the case. The parents still, to this day, would like to have that local independent inquiry. Now, Hull City Council did carry out a limited internal investigation. And when you compare and contrast that to the Enstry report, you see it is a pale imitation. It's in terms of, they did not proactively look through their records, they only looked where they were asked to by parents. And I have some sympathy, because I know there are parents who do not want to have all of this talked about and looked at again. But clearly, I think for lessons to be learned, that everything has been done, that we can now reassure ourselves that this could never happen again, I think it would be right for all the records to be looked at by an independent person. And in the meantime, despite Hull City Council saying they wouldn't pursue an independent inquiry, I, along with Tina, put together a coalition of people who did think this was the right thing to do. And I just want to mention briefly the Cooperative Funeral Care, one of the largest, I think the largest funeral care companies in the country, the Association of Funeral Directors, Cruise, the bereavement charity, Dignity, who are the largest operator of crematoriums in England. These organisations all came together to back what Tina and the 100 families in Hull were saying. And the very last thing I just wanted to say was that I was very pleased last year in 2019 that actually the minister's predecessor came to Hull and actually met with a group of families who'd been affected by this, and we had the chief executive of Hull University Teaching Hospital Trust there as well as the local council representatives, and it was quite clear this is many years on for a lot of those women and their families. But the pain is still there, and the questions are still there, and they still feel that the institutions, be it the council or the NHS, are not properly recognising or understanding the real concerns that those families still have. So we had that meeting. I hope from today, and now that my honourable friend for Swansea East has got this debate called, that we might have another opportunity to say a local independent inquiry in Hull would be the right thing to do for these families, would provide some closure. I know it won't provide all the answers that people need, but it would help to feel that institutions of the state are taking the concerns of families properly in this incredibly sensitive and difficult area.
Shadow Minister